Going from this to this on a super tight budget. There's three areas I need to focus on when it comes to the track car. Making it stop better, making it go better, and making it handle better. This is going to cover the making it stop better. We've got making it go better by the engine that's down there in the garage. That's a later video. But we're going to start easy. A brake upgrade. When it comes to braking, in simple terms, bigger is better. It's one of those things in life that it applies to. Now, that's not always true, but for this purpose, bigger is better. So, conveniently for us, BMW E46 brakes fit an E36 with very little modification at all. I could go down the rabbit hole of looking at big brake upgrade kits. There's many aftermarket companies that do them, 6 piston calipers, but I think it's a bit excessive and it's a big old cost. Hopefully all in, I can do a big brake upgrade kit on the E36 for less than about 300 quid. So here goes. What you need to find on your favourite auction site, or you can still buy it brand new from the dealer, is a E46 330i front caliper and its carrier. Obviously you could buy the pads and the discs as well, but we're going to use those new. So all you need really is that bit. And then also you're going to need a caliper rebuild kit. These are available from a few companies online. Big Red's one of them. And as part of that kit, you'll get a few bits and bobs. It looks a lot more daunting than it is, but within that rebuild kit, you'll get a few things. Namely the piston, that's the bit that pushes the pad on the inside. You'll get a dust seal, you'll get the seal that seals the piston, and then things like the guide pin seals, and then if you've got more in-depth rebuild kits, you'll also get new slide pins, new kind of retaining clips. So that's an old one, and then, you know, nice shiny new ones, but, you know, functionally they're the same. It just makes it look a bit better. But yeah, they all come in packs, pre-made, in a packet, ready to go. One thing I'll touch on quickly, there's two types of caliper generally, floating and non-floating, or fixed calipers. Fixed calipers are just that. They are bolted to the hub and they don't move. They have pistons on both sides, hence like 6 piston, 4 piston. There's a matched pair acting against each other, whereas a floating caliper, like the ones I'm going to rebuild, are 1 piston and then 2 slide pins which push the opposite direction. So if you ever get sticking calipers, the reason for that could be the slide pins, and then, you know, or if you've got a pad that's on the piss when it's worn, one could be seized, you know. So it's all important that we keep it all clean and well working, so we've got nice braking performance. Right, so this is the caliper. You'll see on a floating caliper, generally there are slide pins in these like dust covers. So you pop the dust covers off and inside of them are the slide pins. So there we go. So on BMW calipers, they are usually a 7, which you will find in most socket sets don't have, which is really annoying. So you will need to find a 7 separately. Conveniently, I have a 7 because I work on BMWs a lot. But yeah, in a standard Allen key set like this, you'll never find a 7. Well, you might in a more extensive one, but generally you never do. So yeah, find yourself a 7. On some bigger brakes, it's an 11, which is again a very weird size that you won't find. Take your ratchet and unwind them both out completely. Once your slide pins are out, well, loose, your carrier will come off and then your caliper is on its own. Slide pins can come out now. If you're replacing them, you can chuck these away, or if they're serviceable, you know, clean them up and then reuse them. There's cause of debate of what lube you use them on, but we're not having that debate today. So those pop out like that, and then we end up with this. And this is the piston that we need to remove to replace. Now there's a way to do this. There's been one tool I've been after for forever in the automotive world, but I have never justified being able to spend the money. However, Hikmicro messaged me the other day and said, do you want a thermal camera? And I was like, yes, yes I do, because these things are extraordinarily useful. Off the top of my head, I can think of 3 very good use cases for a thermal camera when messing about with cars. Firstly, braking. We've been talking about braking. If you've got a sticky caliper, but you don't know which one it is, point a thermal camera at it, and whichever one's the hottest, that's the one that's sticking. If you've got a misfire on an engine, if you point your thermal camera at your exhaust manifold and one of them isn't as hot as the other cylinders, bingo, you found your misfire. And a more slightly complicated problem, if you've got voltage drop or voltage draw in a fuse box and you can't work out which fuse it is, thermal camera. Whichever one's the warmest, that's the one that's got current flow through it. This is their E01 model, which is part of the Eco series. It's kind of like their entry-level thermal cameras. But for me, it's perfect. It's got your temperature readout, if that's the kind of thing you're interested in, and then whatever's glowing is the hot thing. Now, it's not 4K, but it's 96 by 96 pixels, which is more than enough. It'll upscale till 240 by 240, which again is more than enough to work out what you're trying to look at. I don't do circuit boards or anything that small, so I'm not really that interested in super accurate stuff. It does up to 400 Celsius, so you know, you're good for exhaust manifolds, that kind of thing. It's also got a built-in memory because you can do snapshots. So if you're in a garage and you needed to upload evidence, or you know, just for safekeeping, or even put it on YouTube, it's all stored in here. As per usual, link in the description. There's currently a £40 voucher, which makes it about £140 in the UK, which is super good value for a thermal camera. Normally they're in the hundreds and thousands to buy them. So yeah, for just a kind of quick, easy, click and go, perfect. Let's get back onto braking. To remove the piston, we're going to first need to remove the bleeder, which is good because obviously you need the bleeder to work. Otherwise it's kind of pointless having the caliper. So find yourself an appropriate spanner, which I think is a 8 on these. Yes, it is. And then hopefully it'll come out. If it doesn't feel like it's going to come out, don't force it. You want to heat it and get it out gently. But having already undone the other caliper from this set, I think they were serviced pretty regularly and they're not very seized. So you just give it a good smack. Yeah, this one comes out fine. So yeah, wind this all the way out, and then we shall use some air to get the piston out. Again, if you have a rebuild kit, you'll probably get new ones of these, but weirdly my rebuild kit didn't come with them. I think it was meant to, but I've also found that the B&W ones are better than some of the new ones because the new ones are a bit soft and horrible. But either way, so we've now got an open place to put our air. What you want to do is flip her over. Obviously there's going to be a bit of brake fluid. Get yourself something. Oh, hang on, I'm covering my whole toolbox in brake fluid. 1 second. Let's get rid of that. Lovely. Right, try again. Yeah, what you want to do is get yourself an airline, like so, and pop it in the hole where the bleeder was. Now, do not put your fingers in this gap whilst doing so, because you'll lose them. You need a small piece of wood. This one is a bit too big actually, but what you'll see is when you put the air in, it will move. Now, obviously, also my brake line here is being cut, so it also needs blocking off. You could also put the air down this line as well. As long as you're getting the air in the cylinder somehow, it doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grip off the pipe. If I can find a gripping apparatus, there we go. So yeah, this is just a pipe clamp for brake lines. So we'll just block that off so the air can't escape back up the opposite direction. And then fire in the hole. A little bit of air. Keep your fingers well away from there. And there we go. It pops right out, and the dust seal will be locked into, you can just see it, come a bit closer, you can see the dust seal will be locked into that gap. So, move that out of the way, and then hopefully if it's not seized, you can pull it out the rest of the way by hand, like that. Luckily, these calipers they're either not very old or they were rebuilt or, you know, remanufactured at some point. I should explain why I'm doing this. Obviously not all calipers need rebuilding, but if you're buying used calipers, you don't know the history of them, and as I said previously, brakes are kind of important. So I would much rather rebuild a caliper for not a huge cost. I mean, this whole rebuild kit was like 20 quid, 30 quid, so yeah, £15 a corner. For that peace of mind, I would much rather do it. But why do we do it? So this is the piston. It's made out of metal, steel. It rusts over time, and as we know on cars, when things rust, they do a thing called rust jacking. Obviously it's not as bad on a piston of a caliper, but rust makes things bigger. So what happens is, that lives inside a bore, i.e. the caliper. if it gets rusty on the edges, it either sticks or it comes out on an angle, you know, it gets sticky. What you want this is to come in nice and freely and smoothly and act upon those two pads and then go back in again when you're done with it. If it's not going back in, you get a sticky caliper, which, you know, on a track, that's going to lose you time, but also it's going to kill your brake pads, kill your brake discs, cover your wheels in horrible dust, and, you know, it's just not working as efficiently as possible. So, you know, for the cost, it's worth doing. Then as part of the rest of the rebuild kit, basically the rest are consumables. You've got the rubber seal on the inner, the dust seal, and the two, like I call them guide seals for the slide pins. There is a point where I would not bother rebuilding a caliper. Obviously, if you, A, can't get that piston out without, you know, welding something to it to pull it out, which I've done before, you know, the caliper body is probably past its best. But if it just pops out like that, it's probably good again. You know, in the past when I've not been able to get pistons, just a tiny bit of wet and dry on these just to get the, you know, the little tiny, like this isn't even that bad. It's got tiny, tiny rust spots on it. You could probably get away with it, you know, just reusing it. You know, a bit of wet and dry, pop it back in and off you go again. But as I say, rebuild kits for these are dirt cheap because people use these calipers all the time for big brake upgrades. Can't even say it anymore. The other thing you want to inspect is inside the bore. Obviously get rid of all the brake fluid that's been sat inside there. If it's, you know, scored or there's any big high spots or chunks missing or any of that malarkey, it's probably not worth rebuilding. But mine's nice and smooth, nice and clean. The next step is then obviously just pull all the seals out. There's the dust seal, which just pulls off, get a screwdriver, pop it off, and the two guard seals are just kind of shoved in there. So yeah, pull it all off because we're going to need to make this caliper look a bit more zhuzhy. With your screwdriver in like that, if you literally just pop it in the top and pry, the whole thing will pop out like so. Oh, get it in frame. And then that just pulls straight out. And that's it, you've got two clean holes. And then for the seal, try and find an edge. I've shown this tool before, but this is like a O-ring kind of seal tool. Yeah, just find an edge like that. Find the gap. And then kind of follow it all around. And then eventually, there you go, your dust seal just pops straight off like that. Job done. You can take the inner square seal out now, or you can do it later. You know, it's up to you. So that comes out like that. And that's about it. The rest of it's just caliper. I like to leave the brake pipe in to block the hole while we're cleaning and painting it. But yeah, that's about it really. You are then going to want to employ one of these and some wet and dry, maybe some brake cleaner. You're just going to want to clean the best you can. Get all the gunk and the rust and the crap off this. Obviously try and avoid the piston, well not the piston, but the bore where the piston lives. Mask it up with some masking tape if you're unsure about, you know, getting stuff in it. But give it a damn good clean and get all the crud off it. I bought a kit off eBay. There's plenty of kits in the UK. We have a place called Halfords. They sell caliper paint, which is high temperature paint. There's plenty of people that make it, you know, primered ones, unprimered ones with lacquer, two-part. I can't recommend, you know, a specific brand because I've used various ones and had various results. To be honest, I found one on Amazon because I wanted it quick. A company called E36, not a sponsor. They send you brake and clutch cleaner as a, you know, as a can, but generally I buy it in big 20 litres tub, so, you know, whatever. And then an enamel brushable paint, so you can see the colour I've gone for. But spray is available. You might get a better result with spray. You could have them powder coated. You can send them off. That's completely up to you. You know, you don't have to do the painting at all. Functionally, it's the same. This is just so it looks a bit more jazzy. Now we're going to assume that I cleaned up that caliper and made it all pretty and then painted it and then some days passed, which it did, because enamel paint takes quite a while to go off. And then you're left with quite a stark change. The orange is quite bright. So this is the carrier. It probably wants another coat really, but what you've got to think is under a wheel, you see that, literally that edge, and then there'll be a pad and a caliper here. So, you know, it's up to you how nice you make it. I've never been any good at brush painting. I'm all right at spray painting, but brush painting, I just lose interest and get bored. So yeah, so paint that. we're obviously going to have to remove the paint from where the sliders go, but you know, we can do it in a minute. And then we've also got the main caliper body, which has also had a coat of paint, obviously the old pipes left in. And then this is now ready to have its new internals put in. As per usual, the garage is a mess. There's stuff everywhere, but I have a little bit of a work area. If we move all that crap out of the way. Right, let's use the paper bag. So what you want to start with first is you need some sort of grease, or use brake fluid. If you use brake fluid, it gets everywhere, which is the problem. I generally like to use red rubber grease because, well, that's what it's designed for. It's rubber grease. So yeah, take a small amount and gently, or generously I should say, lubricate the square seal. And obviously it's called a square seal because it's got square edges. Generally O-rings are round edged. That's why brake piston ones are different. So that pops in the groove that is inside the caliper. It should be quite a snug fit. And what you want to make sure is the square edge is all the way around. Make sure it's not twisted or turned. You may notice I've also got a little bit of paint on the lip. It doesn't really matter. As long as there isn't any in the bore, you know, we're good. You know, as we mentioned earlier, if you've got paint down there, it's not going to let the piston come in and out nicely. So best to do it properly. So this is the next step. This is a dust seal. You need to put the dust seal on the piston first. I've had general success with doing so. You can put the piston in first and then try and finagle this on, but you know, generally I find if you pop this on here first, it's a hell of a lot easier. You can just do it with your hand, you don't need any special tools, and also make sure it doesn't invert on itself. Obviously, depending on the brand of caliper, depends on how easy or difficult this will be, but generally it slips in like so. And then just run your thumb around where it lives in the groove. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And then you'll see that it sits without rolling too much in that gap. There we go. And then once you've got it nice and smooth, you can slide the rest of it back up. And then basically what we're going to do is that's going to go in the hole, and then we're going to slide the rest of the boot, or the, whatever you want to call it, the seal over. And then liberally we can grease her up again. When we bleed the brakes, all this grease will end up going through the bleed nipple and out. So, you know, it's not the end of the world if you put a bit of grease on it. The last thing we want is that seal in there rolling over when we push it in. That's not a good time. And then, hopefully, I've not test fitted these, I'm hoping they're the right size. Hopefully, it's just a case of popping it in like that, and then gently, gently, gently wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Ooh, keep it in shot would be helpful. There we go, you'll feel it go in. Hang on, let's press it. After much wiggling, I was slightly on the piss. So yeah, so then it pops in, and then it should just move by hand. And then luckily on these calipers, the dust seal literally just clips in. So you'll see it there. You just push it over the gap, and then round the backside we might have to give it a little poke to lock her in. Again, use your blunt spudger. Don't use a screwdriver, well, you can use a screwdriver, but make sure you have a soft edge. And then that's it. It literally just goes on. You might find it pops off the other side when you do the other side. And there we go. Pop it on all the way around. And that's it. One seal on, and then you can then push the piston all the way back. And what you might need to do is lift the edge and burp it, because you'll get some trapped air. Let's make sure this is properly seated, because that lifted back up again. Now, once you've got your piston in, you're going to want to put your new guide pin sleeves, seals, whatever you want to call them, in. So they should come as part of your rebuild kit. So this is what they look like. Nice clean ones. Again, if there was nothing wrong with the last ones, just clean them, you can reuse them. Purely their job is to keep the pin, you know, in position and square. These come with some silicone lube, which is what I prefer to use. You You don't want to overdo it because once it dries out, it gets claggy, sticky, slide pin, no slidey. One other useful thing to do is obviously there's threaded holes in these caliper brackets. If you're getting paint and crud and stuff in them, not very good. You want to clean the threads out. Now, you don't want to use a tap. The thing with taps is they remove material, which we don't want to do that. We just want to clean the threads. I can't remember if I've ever shown this tool, but this is a thread cleaning kit. Snap-on do one for many million pounds. This one was off Amazon, I think. When I used to restore classic cars, it was used daily because threads just get crudded up and horrible. So the beautiful thing about this is, let me just grab one out. All the Imperial ones are knackered, again, restoring classic cars, but luckily my metric ones are quite nice. This is what they look like. They are pretty much a bolt with like flutes kind of ground into them. You can just use a bolt and grind a little, you know, channel in it to get rid of the waste material, but that's all it is. It then slips in the hole. Again, that's the wrong one. Let's find the right one. It's not very well rehearsed, is it? So yeah, you find your thread and then wind it in and out. What you'll find, I think, on these calipers is they're an M7, I think, which you won't find in that. So yeah, if it's an M7, wind the slide in, you know, in and out, and if it's not sticky, you'll be fine. But if not, you're gonna have to find an M7 one. Luckily, the mounting holes I do have one for. So yeah, they just wind and out. If it's, you can do it by hand, there's no problem at all. But it just gets rid of any, you know, paint, crud. The last thing you want to do is try and fit this washer on the car, and then you can't get the bolt in and cross thread it, and world of pain. You don't want to go there. So yeah, sometimes preparation is just, you know, that extra 2 minutes is worth it. When it comes to putting the guide sleeves in, a little bit of rubber grease doesn't hurt. Helps them slide in just on the outside. Just run it all the way around, you know, on the thing, and then hopefully, if you just put it in the hole, you know, wiggle, 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 it should, if it's lubricated properly, there you go, it slides all the way through, and just keep going until it pops out the other side, like that, and then rinse and repeat for the other side. So this is the wheel off the E36, taking the disc off the hub, calipers off the bracket, and then here, if we look down, this is the original disc on top of the new disc. There's not a huge amount in it, but it's a good, you know, it's a good 20-30 mil. I think these are a 286 or 296, something like that, and then the E46 ones are 325. So a bit more braking. And there we have it. Because it's a BMW, everything just fits. The carrier and the caliper are on beautifully. We've got a coated disc, and away we go. I've been told this should fit under a 17, so we're about to find that out. And there we go, and as if by magic, the 17 fits quite nicely. You can still get, well, half your finger in the gap, but I will be changing these wheels because I hate these wheels on an E36. They've been overdone so many times, but never mind. I'm hopefully going to find some sunflowers, which are my favourite wheel for an E36. Haven't decided to go DS1 or DS2 yet, but when I find a set, you'll know about it. This week's video is fairly short because on Sunday, it's currently Saturday, I will be driving down to France till the following Friday because one of our work trucks is in France and needs some love. And then the following Wednesday, which is the 13th, I will be flying to California for a holiday. It's Monterey Car Week. So I've actually taken some time off and is going to go and see one of my best friends who lives near San Francisco in the Bay Area, stay with him for a bit, do Monterey Car Week, and then pop down to Los Angeles for 3 days on the way home, you know, chill out, actually relax. So I might film the trip and upload it, but yeah, as I said, you know, in previous videos, I'm not pressuring myself into making videos all the time because, yeah, I need to enjoy life, and this is just for fun, and I wasn't enjoying it. So I'm only going to film the bits and bobs that are worth filming, per se. I haven't decided yet what's happening with that 330i, that's 330i? M54 330 engine that's sat literally there. I might try and do a few track days without it first and see what the engine's like in that shell. I mean, I've never driven it. I've driven it literally from the guy's house home because it had 1 day of MOT. So yeah, we'll get these brakes fitted, and then, yeah, chuck it in for an MOT, drive it around a bit, because it's getting to the end of summer. I'm going to miss track day season if I'm not careful, and wet track days are not fun. So yeah, hopefully I'll get a video out about America. I'm not going to film a work trick, obviously, because it's work. So yeah, I will see you in the next one. It might be 2-ish weeks, but yeah, keep in touch. The Instagram DMs are always open. You know, I'm happy to chat to people, and I enjoy the communication and talking to people out there, because life's pretty lonely otherwise. Right, catch you in the next one.